Awesome. Thank you, Talka. So now that we have seen True Brew go through a digital order and order processing in Business Central, we get to see how tax determination is delivered seamlessly with Avalara. So let's first address how and why sales tax can even be so complicated in the first place for distributors like True Brew. Whether it's expanding into new states, maybe starting to sell online, or perhaps even supporting more customer types, this is all going to lead to more transactions across more systems. And with that, tax compliance issues don't just show up at month end. They show up during order capture, pricing, fulfillment, and invoicing. So when that complexity isn't handled well, it creates order delays, manual rework, and risk that ultimately is going to slow down the business. Now, as transaction volume and complexity increase, manual processes simply don't scale. Those spreadsheets that you may be managing today and one-off fixes, they may work early on, but they're inevitably going to break down as your business grows. This is where automation becomes less about efficiency and more about keeping orders moving, reducing exceptions, and giving teams confidence that compliance is handled consistently across all channels. So exempt and resale sales are certainly a normal part of distribution, but they introduce risk when that documentation isn't complete or easy to validate. While customers provide certificates, the burden is on the seller to prove why tax wasn't charged. One single missing or invalid documentation can often lead to rework, a delayed close, and audit exposure when exemptions are managed manually or perhaps outside of those core systems. So when we think of getting things right in the world of tax determination, accurate tax outcomes start with how products and services are mapped. So distributors like True Brew often manage thousands upon thousands of SKUs, each with different tax treatment depending on where and how it's sold. When tax content and classification are not consistent, teams are going to rely on overrides and invoice corrections. Clean mapping helps drive consistent results across ERP, e-commerce, and EDI, reducing exceptions and ultimately making those audits and reporting easier. So bringing it back to BC, Business Central remains the system of record for orders, inventory, invoicing, and financials. Avalara works alongside Business Central to support tax determination, exemption handling, and even tariff-related needs within those existing workflows. With Western Computer together, the focus is on reducing risk and rework without slowing the business so teams can scale operations with more confidence. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Renee from Avalara to show just how that is done for True Brew Distribution.
Thanks so much, Ash. So nice to meet all of you, and thanks for joining in on today's webinar. Now, what you're seeing on my screen is actually back inside of Business Central. And one thing I want to point out is how does Commerce Build, how does Business Central, how does Avalara all work together? So an analogy that I want you all to think about is think of Avalara as the center of a Ferris wheel. Business Central is going to call into Avalara. Commerce Build is going to call into Avalara. So when Chris demonstrated that portion, how tax generated there was because of the Avalara portal behind the scenes. When Telka demonstrated the transactions, tax was missing, and that's because now I'm going to leverage that missing gap by showing you how Avalara can natively feed all of that transactional detail by jurisdiction and provide the tax analysis right back into Business Central. Now you may be thinking to yourself, how do all of these pieces work together? So there is a little bit of setup, and that's what brings us to the first screen inside of Business Central. You can see up at the top here this workflow. Upon configuration of the Avalara portal, Avalara will now exist as the top part of the ribbon in your day-to-day work. The mapping exercise we have to think about. There's a mapping of your items that are going to live inside of Business Central. There's also going to be that mapping, that same mapping, as long as what you're selling inside of Business Central is also the same inside of Commerce Build. That mapping exercise will also be done there as well. It doesn't have to be the same, but it can be the same. Well, that tax data here is going to flow to Avalara on the back end. But there's three pillars of data that Avalara needs to have in order to get all of these three systems or even more as a part of your ecosystem to work with the tax engine behind the scenes. So what are those three? Number one, Avalara has to know by legal entity, whether it's derived from an ERP system like Business Central or from an e-commerce platform like Commerce Build, We have to know what your Nexus footprint is. You have to let Avalara know that on an ongoing basis. Once it is turned on inside the Avalara portal, then tax will be derived back into whatever solution connects to it. But now the second and the third pillar consist of what is it that you're actually selling. Avalara refers to that as items, which consist of products and services. Why I bring you to this screen here is Avalara, under the specifications here, there's a setup and then there's a utility. The utility tool drives here all of the Avalara touchpoints that are natively built inside of the Business Central platform. Everything that I am talking about from Avalara, I am going to show you I never left Business Central. Why? Because of that pre-built integration to allow you folks to not have to leave the systems that you are most confident in using on a day-to-day basis, knowing that accuracy, audit readiness, all of the jurisdictional information is handled by a tax engine, and Telka made reference to that we do all the homework on the back end, right? We're trying to allow you from an automation tax perspective that's changing all the time and is very complex. We're allowing you the growth potential to focus on your business and focus on scalability. When we look at this, there's things you want to think about from a customer-related perspective as well, such as address validation. We want to ensure that they're right addresses. We also have to understand the tax code mapping, which is this screen right here. So when we look at this, the items that both Chris and Telka demonstrated consist of these 4 items right here. As you generate new items, we have this all laid out on one screen for you so that you don't have to go to the item level itself, but it's right here mapped. We are not expecting you to be tax experts. We're not expecting you to memorize tax codes. So you as a business have the ability to itemize each and every product or service individually, or you even can utilize category tax codes. But when you select the item, this here, and if I select an item, what this is doing is it's bringing up the catalog of items. So all your folks need to do is figure out, okay, am I selling an espresso machine? Am I selling residential coffee grinders? Are people coming in and purchasing whole beans, or am I distributing that? And then when folks come in, such as like a Starbucks to our True Brew coffee company, they may want to buy our coffee travel mugs. All of those 4 are deemed right here. And then we utilize the Avalara tax code as a one-time mapping exercise right here. Well, behind each one of those tax codes houses all of the pain. It knows exactly how to account for the taxability of any one of these items across all 50 states without you trying to figure out what's the jurisdiction, what's the rate, how do I account for the taxation of these? Is it exempt? Is it taxed at a reduced rate and threshold? Or is it fully taxable? All of that goes into and flows into the data that Avalara is analyzing on the back end in less than a second. So there is no lag time for users inside of Business Central, as well as no lag time inside of an e-commerce platform. Now, as we continue to move on, anytime that there is a tax rate change, do you have to go back in here and update the tax code? And the answer is no. The rate changes will automatically feed through these tax codes that are going to exist here, as well as inside of Commerce Build. So if you were to transact today and you were to transact next month and all the months to come, there can be a variation in tax rates, rules, and jurisdictional mandates. But Avalara is going to capture that in real time to keep you and your business compliant across every jurisdiction. Now, the last pillar of data we have to encompass is your customers. Are your customers taxable? Are your customers exempt? And if they're exempt, why are they exempt? What is the reason? Do you have the appropriate documentation to support, if ever under audit, as to why you did not transact and produce tax on that specific invoice? Obviously, you're transacting, you're just not producing tax. And you do not want the capability of non-tax to be reclassified as taxable with back penalties and interest. So when we move along to the customer card now natively inside of Business Central, there's going to be a few things that happen here. Number one, you're going to put in the headquartered address that is tied directly to that customer. This does not have to mean this is the only address. It is not, obviously, doesn't even have to be the same address where it actually occurs and ships and your customers are using and receiving your goods. However, you have that capability to put that headquartered address right here. Down below, you're going to see, once again, you're going to have related tabs calling directly into Avalara as a real-time call to validate that address. What does that mean? Well, what that means is we're taking this address and we're scrubbing it. Avalara is not assessing sales tax based on a zip or a zip plus 4. We are strictly looking at the conversion of this address, dropping it on a pin on a map behind the scenes, and converting it to latitude and longitude coordinates. That is how we're going to produce the jurisdictions and account for the taxability across every single one of those jurisdictions with the applicable rates. Now, down below here, we want to ensure that all of our customers are marked tax liable, even if they're not. Why? Because Avalara has an engine behind the scene that's going to help you not only store the exempt certificates, but monitor the exempt certificates and maintain those to ensure that your customers maintain their exempt status and do not default to taxability. So with this being said, I want to call your attention now to the related tab. There's 3 Avalara functions. The first one is going to be a validate address. That's the real-time call out to Avalara. It's going to push back the address and ensure it's validated. And you as a business can select it and say, yes, I accept it. Once it's validated, you do not have to revalidate validated addresses. However, let's call your attention to this AvaTax tax exemption tab. If a customer is truly exempt, and this is part of the onboarding process, natively inside of Business Central, you could set up a brand new customer. And if they tell you that they're exempt and you are established with Nexus and you have registered in that state for sales and consumer use tax, guess what? It's important that you as a business obtain that certificate. Right from in here, from the AvaTax tab, you can add update customer to the exemption. This is pushing this data, this customer for this state directly into Avalara without duplication of data entry. Okay? It's creating that customer. And now you simultaneously have the capability to request an exempt certificate. Well, requesting an exempt certificate now executes 2 calls. Number 1, it's going to send a customer a pre-configured email. Well, that email can then go ahead and be automated for recurring customers so that you as a business do not have to get bogged down in trying to understand when do I have to reach back out to obtain a new certificate versus not, okay? What also happens though is they're prompted via that email to a website link called Avalara Cert Express. Now, many times customers do not know what certificates they owe you. There's a lot of back and forth. If they're not sending you the correct certificate, that's not going to protect your business if ever under audit. Therefore, you are not compliant with the state. Well, Avalara has a tool for your customer to be able to select the state and the reason, and Avalara populates the form that needs to be completed. Well, that form is not going to be stored and maintained in Business Central. It's going to be stored and maintained in Avalara. And for validity purposes and accuracy, you inside of Business Central now can retrieve any certificates that are valid inside of Avalara directly inside of Business Central. So now here as a customer, if I called you up and said, can you guys verify for me if I sent you the Washington resale exempt certificate form? Immediately I can hit that retrieval and it's going to bring me to a list, okay, of all of the state certificates that I have on file for this customer. So right here, you're going to see Washington. If this was a lengthy list, you're going to see it right there. That is also a trigger, though, to understand, okay, if I have a certificate on file, that means I'm expecting $0 of tax for this customer. And if I know this is an ongoing exempt customer and all of a sudden I see tax, that could be an indicator to say, something happened with their certificate. Did they not proactively send it to me prior to an invoice? And if it's expired, Avalara is going to kick in by default to help ensure that you as a business are protected and paying the state. Are there workarounds? Absolutely, that can be addressed directly inside of Business Central upon implementation. So here's your proof that Avalara is going to always send you the most valid certificate, but is also going to store those expired certificates. So that takes those 3 pillars of data, understanding how we all connect the dots. Now, I'm picking up the missing piece from when Telka demonstrated an exempt transaction and a taxable transaction. First, we're going to look at an actual exempt transaction. So I went ahead and actually posted this transaction for you to see. I picked on this my whole coffee beans, and I picked my espresso machine. I have an exempt certificate on file, as I just demonstrated right here, because this customer is a reseller of these products for me. The quantity I have right here, so I've demonstrated my unit cost. My total is $180 as what Telka demonstrated, and $380 for espresso machine. Well, there's no tax right here. But before you go to post, Avalara has a tool to help eliminate how many times you have to credit memo or credit rebill. And that's by hitting the invoice tab and statistics. Now, when I show you this, this is taking the 3 pillars of data and making it live for you. We have to first understand, where is all the data coming from? Is it from a warehouse? Is it from a headquartered address? Where is the data coming from? Where is the data going to? Where are those products and services going to where your customer is actually going to use and consume? So when Chris demonstrated and showed that the goods were getting shipped to, I believe it was Batavia, New York, as well as Telka, well, that's where we have to think about, okay, what's the tax that's being generated? In this case, it's going to Seattle, Washington from Georgia. Now, when we drill down into here, Avalara is also taking into account the ship from and the ship to and converting both to latitude and longitude. Why? Because there's an additional concept of state sourcing rules that have to get applied for the breakout of potential taxability across state, county, city, and various jurisdictions, whether it's origin-based, destination-based, or hybrid-based. We take that burden off of your plate. Drilling in down here proves out why there is no sales tax. This is the brains of Avalara coming directly into your ERP system, and this is the brains coming directly into Commerce Build to prove out we are not assessing sales tax for this customer. The reason being here is because we have the exempt certificate on file, and when you're looking at all of this, we can see here, what are the jurisdictions, what is the rate, and what is the taxable amount? Okay, it means that everything is derived from a tax exempt amount in that column. When I pivot back here, the next line item, you can also see that as well. So by line item, you will be able to see that there is no tax being produced. But now what happens instead of an exempt customer? We have a taxable customer. We want to see the tax breakout. We want to ensure, is it all taxable, or is a portion of it non-taxable and a portion of it exempt? How we determine all of that, what derives in these columns, is based on the taxability tax codes that you've mapped across those items that live inside a Commerce Bill, that live inside a Business Central. That's going to produce if it's fully taxable or a portion is non-taxable. And the exempt ties directly with the exempt certificates. So in the last post here of another invoice, I have generated for you an actual customer that has come into our True Brew coffee store and has bought a coffee grinder for residential purposes, and they bought 1 travel mug. They travel a lot. They need to keep their coffee warm. You can see here that the the tax amounts that we're going to tax it based on derives right here. Well, now you see a total tax. It's no longer 0. Why? Avalara made that determination, pushed back tax, and now let's drill in once again. I now see that there's $12 of tax. Here's the $12 of tax, right? It's a $150 product. We have now a New York County and a New York State component jurisdiction. This is going to Batavia, New York. And now based on these amounts times the rate that's going to constantly change, Avalara is showing you now how much tax is going to be calculated per jurisdiction. So this allows you to know that all of that accuracy is being done behind the scenes, but leveraging the system that you are most comfortable with and knowing you would be able to address any customer tax related questions right from this screen. I know it's a lot to take in, but I want to thank you for your time. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Ash now as we jump into our next slide. So thank you.
Awesome. That was great. Thanks, Renee. So this diagram that we're seeing here shows the basic interaction between Avalara and your business systems. Here we can see True Brew is integrated with Business Central and Commerce Build, but of course the architecture of your integrations can vary based on where your transactions are being committed. And ultimately what we'll do is connect all of your systems with our pre-built connectors so that you can do a few things. Establish a single source of truth for compliance data, estimate recalculation and duplicate transactions across multiple systems, track liabilities in all systems, apply consistent tax rates for reconciliation, track economic nexus, and enable automation of returns filing and remittance. So here at Avalara, we have over 1,500 pre-built integrations. So chances are, whatever system you're on, we've got you covered. We also have an API connection if you do have any kind of homegrown systems. But we've got you covered with kind of our pre-built integrations. All right, and then wanted to transition to the hot topic of tariffs. I know tariffs are becoming definitely more and more of a consideration for distributors, especially as sourcing expands and supply chains change. So with this, rates and rules vary by product and country, and classification directly impacts landed cost and margins. When tariff considerations are handled late or manually, pricing surprises and margin erosion follow. The goal is not to turn a distributor like True Brew into trade experts. It's more into getting visibility and consistency into how duties and tariffs are handled as a part of your day-to-day operations. So if tariffs are something that you yourself get the pleasure of dealing with at your company, Avalara's got you covered. And it's over to you, Amy.
All right, Renee, you mind keeping the slides going if that's okay? I think the rest, okay. Okay, well, you saw a lot today. You saw how all of these pieces connect and come together from e-commerce to ERP to sales tax and compliance and exemption certificates. So this is obviously crosses all teams, finance, operations, and IT. And we want to scale for growth. That is the main goal. And by using all of these solutions together, that will help you do it a little bit easier and will help with those disconnected systems that you may have. It may help with those slower orders that you have. It may help, obviously, with compliance with sales tax and exemption certificates. And of course, funneling it all into Business Central as your source of truth. And just to kind of wrap it all up with this bigger picture and what it really looks like and why we're here today and why we wanted to share these different solutions with you and how they all work together, because this is what modern distribution looks like. These systems working together, fewer handoffs, better decision making, turning those insights into action, creating that scalable growth so that way you can focus on growing your business, like Renee said, versus having to worry about sales tax, versus having to worry about your e-commerce and getting those customers' orders in time, and having it all be in Business Central to help you manage it all. So I hope that you were able to see that bigger picture today and see how all of these solutions work together to help make it easier. And to wrap it all up, I again hope you found this informational and educational, that these tools, these features, all of these solutions help reduce friction, help get orders done, help be compliant, and having Business Central as your backbone to make it all happen with these connected systems from e-commerce to sales tax. And we'd like to thank you for being here and for joining us. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have a few minutes So we could certainly answer those. And just want to let you know this is being recorded. So we will be sending out a recording email in the next couple of days, as well as a asset that we put together, or a guide that kind of shows all the different features and functionality of these solutions, where they play, what you need to know, how they all work together. And hopefully that will help you understand where you might need, where those gaps are, where you need to fill, where those pain points are, and these solutions and where they fit in and how they can help your distribution. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can certainly answer them. Another quiet group. I usually don't get many questions when I do these. But like I said, we'll be sending out an email with the recording, and you can certainly reach out to any of our presenters today if you do have any questions, and you can certainly reach out to me as well. Happy to help in any way that I can, but stay tuned for that recording email and that asset to keep you thinking about what your distribution looks like today and how you can use these solutions to make it better. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Telka, Chris, Renee, Ash, and Katie, for being here and presenting to us. We appreciate it. Thank you
Appreciate it.
all.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.